Serving is how we lead. Look what Jesus says here. And Jesus called them to him and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. Now, here's what I know. The moment that I said leadership, 10% of you in the room, you got really excited. You're like, leadership, I love leadership. I'm a boss. Right? I'm a CEO. I run my own business. Like, I got employees that report to me. I'm a team lead, or I have a desire to become a pastor. Like, I love leadership. 10% of you got really excited, and then 90% of you checked out because you're like, I'm not a leader. I'm never going to be a leader. I don't want to be a leader. No, thank you. I'm not a leader. But I want you to understand something, is that everyone is a leader at some level. Every single person is a leader at some level. Here's what John Maxwell, he says, that leadership is influence. If you have influence in another person's life, congratulations, you're a leader. You may not be the boss, you may not be the CEO, you may not be the director, but if you are a mom or a dad, you have a leadership in your home. If you're a husband or a wife, you have a leadership in the family. If you are a husband, then you are the spiritual leader over your house. If you have a job, then you have the ability to influence those who are around you. If you are a friend, you have tremendous influence on your friends and their decisions that they are making. No matter who you are, where you're at, every single one of you has a sphere of influence where people look up to you, people count on you, and therefore you are a leader. Every single person is a leader at some different level. The question is not, are you a leader? The question is, are you a good leader? Are you leading people to experience life change, or are you leading people away from life change? Every person is a leader. Here's what Jesus shows us, that the best way to be a leader is by learning to serve others. In this text right here, he's juxtaposing two different antithetical ideas, one of worldly leadership and one of godly leadership. He talks about the Gentiles who lord over them. That is that is worldly leadership. That's the way the world works. They exercise authority over them. They say, I'm the boss, I'm the leader, you have to do what I say, I'm in charge, it's my way or the highway. And they lead through fear, they lead through tyranny, they lead through double standards and ultimatums. This is every politician, every athlete, every celebrity, and every person who's virtue signaling on Twitter. And here's what they would say: rules for thee, but not for me. That I don't have to do what I say. I want you to do what I say, and don't do what I do, but rather do what I say. That's the way that the world operates, by lording over people. And Jesus says, but not for my church, not for my people. That's not the way that we lead in the kingdom. That we don't follow worldly leadership, but rather we follow godly leadership. You ever had a boss who led like a worldly leader? Right? You ever had worked with a person who led that way? Right? You ever been in a relationship where the other person treated you that way? You ever been in college class where your professor taught that way? You ever had friends that acted that way? Yeah, you probably weren't friends with them for very long, and if not, then welcome to redemption. Either they get saved or you need better friends, all right? But when you went to work and you had a boss that led like that, did it just inspire you to be the best that you can be? Did it motivate you to reach your fullest potential? Like, did you wake up every morning just like, I can't wait to go to work, all right? No, you probably felt devalued and dehumanized and very discouraged in a toxic environment like that. That's why Jesus says, in the church and as my people, that should not be amongst you at all. Instead, we should practice a godly leadership, not by bullying people, but by building them up, and not by lording over them, but rather by serving them. Here's what Jesus is doing. He is correcting their character. Because in leadership, character is what matters most. See, capacity will get you in the door. Calling might get you an interview, but it is character that is going to sustain you. There's a lot of people who have great callings, but they have terrible character, and therefore their calling doesn't last for very long. And so it's the character of the leader that matters most. Jesus understands this because in just a few weeks after this story, Jesus is going to be arrested, crucified, he is going to die, and then he's going to hand his mission over to these disciples. And the way that they learn to lead now is going to set up the trajectory for the church for the next 2,000 years. And so Jesus wants to make sure that he gets their character in check. He's talking here about their character because if they want to continue the work of Christ, then they need to adopt the lifestyle of Christ, and they need to learn how to lead like Christ leads. As Christians, we need to learn how to lead like Christ would lead. And how does Christ lead? He leads by serving. So what are some of the qualities of a Christ-like leader. I see that there's 5 in this text. Let's take a moment and just look at them. The first thing is that a Christ-like leader is a good listener. Here's what Jesus does. He sees them arguing and fighting amongst themselves, and yet he still calls them to sit down and have a conversation. He doesn't just go off the handle and say, hey, you knock that off. Stop talking about that. I don't want to hear that anymore. We're going to have this conversation. No, he pulls them in and says, okay, what you said, let's go ahead and talk about that for a little bit. Go ahead and just share your heart with me. How are you doing? What is Jesus doing? He's modeling listening. Number 2, he's humble. A Christ-like leader is humble. Here's what Jesus could have said. Who's the greatest? Me, I'm the greatest. That's why they call me the I am, because there ain't nobody like me, right? I am the greatest, right? He could have said that, but that's not what he does. Instead, he just listens and he practices humility. See, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but rather it's thinking of yourself less, and Jesus models that before them. Number 3, Jesus, he shows that a Christ-like leader is appreciative. Now, you could read this on the surface, you're like, what idiots? How did they ask that question? Who's the greatest? Who's going to sit at the right hand of God in glory? But I don't read it like that. Like Jesus was not upset with them, but rather I believe that Jesus appreciated them because he knew the intention of the question they're asking. They just want to be close to him. They've already laid down their entire lives to follow him. And so they're saying, hey, when we get into glory, like, can we be as close to you as possible? I believe that in this moment, Jesus is actually appreciative of the question, though it was misguided, but underneath the surface, it actually was a good question. And so Jesus is going to have to redirect them in a moment. But I believe that Jesus was appreciative of the sacrifice over the last 3 years these disciples made. The number 4, a Christ-like leader is trustworthy. Why would they even think that this was an appropriate question to ask? You know why? Because for 3 years, Jesus has built trust with them. That they are not afraid to ask a question. They feel safe, they feel valued, and they know that they can ask a question without fear of retaliation. Jesus had spent that time building that trust in the heart of his disciples to where they weren't afraid of failure. And so they felt safe enough to ask a difficult question because Jesus was trustworthy. Then number 5, Jesus was caring. Did Jesus care for his disciples? Absolutely. If he didn't care for them, they wouldn't have made it past chapter 2. He'd be like, I'm done with you. Let's move on, right? But no, Jesus cared for them because Jesus saw the potential that is inside of them, and he knew what their future was, and he knew the process in which they are all on. Jesus demonstrates these things. And so right now, some of you are thinking, okay, that's great for Jesus, but that's not me. Maybe that's qualities for you as our pastor, but that's not for me. What does this do with me? I thought, Byron, the goal of this sermon was to teach me the core value, to manipulate me to go to next step so I can join a team, but I don't feel that right now. Now all I'm just thinking about is how Jesus leads others and how that applies to me. Here's how it applies to you, because you could take these same principles and values and then you can apply them outside of the team and into your family. Could you imagine as a spouse, if you learn to practice these leadership qualities with your spouse, if you learn to listen and to be appreciative and to care and to build trust, if you learn these values as a parent, if you would lead your children with listening ears and with a humble heart and with compassion and with caring and showing appreciation towards your children, imagine putting these practices at work on the team that you go to or in your college or with your dorm mates. Imagine with your friends, if you learn to practice these values that you learn through serving, how will that transform your life beyond a Sunday morning? Because when you come to redemption, you need to understand this, is that we don't use people to grow the church. No, we use the church to grow people. That who you are is more important to us than what you do. And it's when you join a team, you're going to learn life lessons, you're going to learn values, you're going to be strengthened, you're going to be encouraged, and you're going to take the lessons you learn from a team, you're going to go home, and you're going to be the best dad you could possibly be, you're going to be the most amazing wife that there ever was, you're going to be the best parents, and that you're going to lead your family, and you're going to lead your friends with the values that you discovered through serving other people. And so it's not just what you can do for us, but rather it's the church creating a system to where you can take these principles beyond the Sunday into your everyday life. That's why it's about leadership. Every single one of you is a leader at some level. The question is not, are you a leader? The question is, are you leading well? Jesus teaches us the best way to lead. And what is that? We lead by serving others.